I grew up in a wonderful home, and I thought really that everyone else did until I joined the Air Force and became acquainted with some people from different kinds of backgrounds. I will remember one young man telling me a story that in a way it had a lot of macho in it, and yet another way it was very sad. He told about growing up with a mother and a mean stepdad who didn't abuse him so much as he abused his mother. And he made a vow as a young man that he one day would get even with his stepfather for the abuse that he saw his stepfather continually inflict on his mother. And he said, I went to work on the railroad, laying rails, taking the hardest job that I could get, because he said, I wanted to become as tough as I could. And he said, I exercised and I worked until I could chin myself with one arm, either arm, just as good as I could with the other. And you fellows ever tried that? That's pretty good strength. And he said, I went home with one purpose in mind. That was to whip that man one time. He said, we didn't have a big house, but I whipped him in every room we had. And he said, to this day, if he sees me coming down the street, he gets on the other side. Now, I think some of you can understand that. Some of you can relate to that kind of an atmosphere. Many of us cannot. The homeless are in the news today. I don't know a thing in the world what it's like to be in a place where I don't have a place to go to that I can call home and shut the door to and know that this is mine, climb into a good bed and sleep peacefully. I don't know anything at all about what it's like to be sleeping out under the stars or under a bridge or in a sleeping bag or in a pup tent or in the doorway of a building or over the grates of a sidewalk. That to me is a pitiful picture. Every time I see a teenager who looks like he or she may be just wandering from place to place, standing beside the highway, not particularly caring in what direction they're going, I always wonder in my mind, what did they leave behind? Are they gone because of rebellion in their own heart? Are they gone because of abuse at home? Are they gone because there is no home to go to? I wonder, are there parents at home who are wondering where their child is? I wonder if there's a dad who gets up every day wondering, will we hear from our son today? I wonder if there's a mother who cries secretly throughout the day, wondering where her daughter is. I wonder if there is an excitement or a dread in their heart every time the telephone rings. Being without a home is something that I can only imagine. But in my imagination, it's a bad state to be in. To have no place to go. To have no bed that's your own. I remember our children when they were small, and we'd go away and spend a few days away. When we got home, no matter what time of day it was, the one thing that I noticed they always did, they ran as hard as they could to their bedroom and to their bed. That seemed to say to them, I'm home. The only time our children really ever were sick when they were away from home. There's something about being home that brings to it a sense of well-being, a sense of health, a sense of security. And to be away from home or to not have a home to go to me, is one of the most frightening experiences that a human being could ever face. I hope that if you have experienced that somehow God has healed of that. I hope that no child in this church ever has to experience that. But there is something far worse than that, and that's to be without God. Jesus told a story, and Luke recorded it in the 15th chapter of his gospel, and let me read it for your refreshing this morning. A certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me. So he divided them his livelihood. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possessions with prodigal living. But when he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in that land, and he began to be in want. Then he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine eat, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. And bring the fatted calf here and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to be merry. If you don't feel at home with God, if you don't feel at home in his presence, that's an awful place to be. Now, I've never slept under a bridge at night. Only ever slept on the ground under the stars a very few times, and that was by choice, and I chose not to do it anymore. I really question the sanity of a fellow that will leave a good home and a warm, comfortable bed and go sleep in the woods. I just really think that fellow needs to be watched. Especially when it's cold or hot. I don't know which is worse. You either freeze, shiver, you would just snuggle up to anything. I mean, even a bear, it wouldn't make any difference if you could just get warm. Or the wintertime, you're trying to keep the mosquitoes out and you're burning up inside the tent. So I don't know which is the worst, but I just choose to be home. But I do know what it's like to be away from God. I know what it's like to be lonely from God. I know what it's like to be separated from him. I know what it's like to be uncomfortable. Have you ever gone into a place that you didn't feel comfortable? It was home to somebody else, but it wasn't home to you. Now that is a sociably undesirable situation. I remember Shirley and I were young and naive in a lot of ways, and the man that I worked with had been saying to me that he wanted Shirley and me to come and eat with him one day. So one Saturday as we were getting off from work, he said, now, I want you and your wife to come eat with us this evening, and I'll be over to pick you up. So he came in the middle of the afternoon and picked us up, and I asked him several times, now, are you sure that your wife is expecting? Oh, yes, everything's fine. Well, we got to the house, and there was no one there. But he assured us that everything was all right and that his wife would be home in a little bit. Well, we had no transportation. We were at his mercy, and I knew he'd been drinking too much. Any is too much so far as I'm concerned, but he'd been drinking too much. And I knew that his judgment wasn't real good, so I kept asking him what's going on. Well, we keep waiting, and there's really no way for us to get home unless he takes us. But he insists that everything's okay. His wife will be home in a little bit, and late in the day, she and a daughter who was soon to be married come in. And they have been downtown Washington all day shopping for a bridal gown. And they are worn to a frazzle. You ladies know how tiresome that is, but somebody has to do it. But this was really shopping of necessity. Well, it was very apparent to us that this lady had not expected company. Someone she had never seen. She had not prepared to come in and prepare supper. And we can hear the argument going on in the background, and we know that we are unwelcome guests in this home. And we felt so uncomfortable. Now, I experienced the same thing spiritually. I know what it is to be in a church where there's the presence of God manifest there. Now, I know what it's like to be in church with the beautiful music, the beautiful robes from the choir, and the beautiful sunlight filtering in through the stained glasses, and feel so good, and just feel so wonderful, and just feel like I belong. And then I know what it's to be like in a place that's completely unpretentious, nothing particularly impressive about it, and yet be so uncomfortable Not because the people were unfriendly, but because somehow I sensed God was in that place. And I felt so out of place. And I felt like I was in the wrong place. And I felt like an uninvited guest. I felt like I was an intruder. And that may be what you experience. And I see people experience that here every week. And I wish that there were some way sometimes that we could make it so socially acceptable to the unsaved that no matter the presence and the glory of God, that they would feel comfortable. But I'm here to tell you this morning that your presence or the presence of anyone means less to me than His presence. And there came a time when I wanted Him. I wasn't satisfied with beautiful liturgy. I wasn't satisfied with beautiful sanctuaries. I wasn't satisfied with high-sounding religious praises. But I wanted God, the living God. I wanted to know Him. I wanted to feel at home in His presence. I did not want to feel intimidated. I did not want to feel like the uninvited guest. I did not want to feel like the unwelcome one anymore. I came to Him, and I committed my life to Him. And He received me. He received me. And He forgave me. And He cleansed me. And you know what? I have always felt so at home in the presence of God. In fact, I just feel very uncomfortable if I sense in any way, to any degree, that God's glory is not present. I won't stay there very long. I'm not going to stay in a place or in company or in a church or in any activity if it interferes or detracts at all from the sense of God's presence in my life. There are some in this room today who may be away from God and away from home. And you feel very uncomfortable even here this morning in this very relaxed atmosphere. You may be feeling as tight as a string on a banjo this morning that's wound up for duty. You may be having a palpitating heart. Your pulse must be 20 points more than it usually is. Your feet may be wanting to get up and run, but that's because of God's presence. Don't run from Him, run to Him. This young man in this story thought that his dad, with his ideas and his rules and the way it was going to be if you're going to put your feet under my table, was a hard man and an unkind man and an uncaring man and a man with no feeling. But there came a day when he came to the realization that his daddy was better to his hired servants than everybody else was being to him. And he said, I'm not going to live the rest of my life like this. I have sinned against heaven. I have sinned against my Father. And I'm going to get up from here, and I'm going to go home, and I'm going to have a conversation with my daddy, and it's going to go something like this. Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I've wasted everything that you gave me, but I'm coming to you if you'll receive me. I know I have no right to ask you to receive me as a son, but I know how you treat your servants. Will you just let me come home and be a servant? Well, the father said, I'll receive you, son, but you're not going to be a servant. You're still my son. You're still welcome, and we'll start all over again. And he began to declare that it was a wonderful, wonderful day in that home because his son had come home. There was a popular gospel song some few years ago. It said, rejoice, rejoice, my son is coming home again. And songs here seem to come into popularity and go out of popularity. But if there are any songs that are especially used and sung by the angels, I think that must be one that's on the all-time hit parade. I think it must be one that the Father tells them to sing again. When our choir gets something that's really good, I tell them to wear it out. And I think God must say, wear it out, sing it again. My son is coming home again. Rejoice with me. Rejoice over my son that was lost. And Jesus said, There is rejoicing in the presence of the angels over every sinner that repents. Do you want to make somebody glad today? Do you want to make God glad today? Do you want to make the angels of the Lord glad today? Do you want to make some parent glad today? Do you want to make this preacher glad? If you're away from God, you're away from home. But there is a home. There is a place that you can enter in. There's a place that you can feel welcome, and it's with Him.